Hey folks, welcome back to my channel. Today we are talking about ear stretching yet again. Now in a recent video I talked about how to go from starting off stretching unsafely to stretching safely and healthily. And I mentioned in that video that that was for folks whose ears are in a relatively okay place. This video is where I'm going to be talking about what to do if you've had a blowout or a tear happen. So first, let's talk about the differences because there are differences and it's important to be able to recognize what's going on with your ear. A tear is typically a little bit more common and sometimes less serious. So when we're stretching our ears, we are enlarging that entire channel of the ear bigger and bigger each time we stretch. Now, if we stretch too quickly or with the wrong materials or with the wrong tools, sometimes we end up putting too much pressure on one area of that scarring, or that scar tissue channel just can't handle how much enlargement we're trying to do in that period of time. And there's always a weakest link. A certain part of the ear buckles and tears. Sometimes tears can be really minor and some folks don't even notice them at all. Sometimes they can be pretty major and you take out your plug a couple days after your stretch and you're experiencing a lot of bleeding and a lot of secretion. The concern with tears is that once you've had a tear in your earlobe, that creates a weaker spot once it heals, and then that tends to be the spot that tears over and over again, and repeated tearing in the same spot can cause thin spots. So where a lot of folks end up tearing is along the bottom of their lobe, which is where that tissue is a little bit weaker and a little bit more fragile, and all it takes is one tiny tear very early on in stretching, and that becomes the weakest part of your lobe. So then as you continue to stretch up, especially if you use improper methods or unsafe materials, that spot is the spot that tears every time you push your ear a little too far until you end up with very bad thin spots, which can prevent you from stretching any further or even cause the entire ear to split at that point and to lose the stretched lobe. So it's really important to be careful with stretching so we avoid this happening. Now, alongside tears, we have blowouts. So when we're stretching our ears, we're stretching that tube of scar tissue that was created when we had our ears first pierced. Because we pierce them, it creates a little wound, and that wound heals on the inside with some scarring. Now, sometimes when we're stretching, and especially when we're going too fast, and we're using the wrong tools, and we're using the wrong supplies, instead of having one weak spot on the ear where the ear just kind of gives up and creates that tear, when we have a blowout, a whole section of that scar tissue it just gives up. And instead of stretching larger around the plug, it actually gets pushed out the backside of the ear, very similar to a prolapse. And just like tears, blowouts come in different levels of severity. Some people end up with a very small blowout where just a tiny portion of that channel gets pushed outwards. A lot of times it ends up being a part that has torn previously, and it's the scar tissue from that tear that's getting pushed out. Some people end up with a moderate to mid-level blowout where it's just a portion, usually along the bottom of the lobe, that blows out. And some folks end up with a full blowout where the entire channel of the piercing has been forced out of the back of the ear. Blowouts are really bad because they're pretty much always permanent. Once a blowout has happened, there's not really that much that you can do to get it to go away or get it to heal up. The only thing you can do is see a modification artist or a surgeon and have the blowout removed. Blowouts can really inhibit stretching in the future. They can prevent you from reaching your goal size. They can sometimes prevent your ear from stretching again at all, and they're just not really the nicest thing to look at. Most folks don't prefer the look of a blown out ear. And typically, if you have a blowout, you're also going to end up with tearing. It's just a whole bad day if you blow out. So now that we've talked about the differences in these two things, let's talk about what to do when they happen. Step one, remove your jewelry. If you've just stretched and you notice that you are having bleeding, if you are checking your ear and you notice what looks to be a blowout, take your plugs out. Do not leave them in at that size. I know that's very hard to hear because you've been stretching for so long and you want to keep the size and you want to maintain it, but leaving jewelry in is only going to cause harm and issues. If you have a tear, it's not going to allow you to clean the area properly and allow it to heal and allow you to assess what's going on, and it's going to continue putting pressure on the portion of the ear that's torn, so it's going to heal with that pressure, and that's what's going to help create thin spots. And if you have a blowout, leaving jewelry in, the weight of that jewelry is just going to be pressing on that blowout and just causing more issues. In fact, sometimes people's blowouts will get worse day by day from leaving those original plugs in. And as an aside, since sometimes these things can happen and be sneaky and you don't notice, please check your ears while you're stretching. Don't just stretch, put it in, and leave it. Actually check along your ear, make sure that it looks healthy, make sure that it feels healthy. Now, once you've removed your jewelry and cleaned things up, you can kind of better assess what's going on. As far as cleaning and caring for the ear right after removing jewelry and after a tear or blowout, step 2 is using mild products that are not going to make matters worse. So all you want to use is saline wound wash and treat it like it is a fresh piercing. A lot of folks during stretching will use oils and balms on their ears to assist with the stretching process. These are great. They don't belong on your ears after a tear or blowout. So no lotions, no oils, no jojoba oil, no vitamin E oil, none of that on your ears after you've blown out. Please treat them like a brand new piercing, just sterile saline. In the same vein, no alcohol, no peroxide. I know it's tempting to reach for, but it's really drying and it can actually cause more issues with that skin, especially fragile blown out skin. Peroxide or alcohol can cause it to dry out and crack and be damaged further. So please just saline. Step 3 is going to be visiting a reputable piercer with experience in stretching in person. In person. There is not too much that we can tell you online from photos aside from take jewelry out and keep it clean. In order for us to do a really proper, really thorough assessment, we have to see your ears in person and see what's going on. Now, if you Google things like blowouts or tears, you'll see all sorts of wild advice, from put this crazy homemade paste on it, to put your plugs in backwards, to put in a plug of a certain material. There's lots of mixed things. And a lot of that is sometimes okay in specific circumstances with a piercer's guidance. If they've assessed your ear and based off your skin, your damage that you've caused, how things are looking, what's going on with the ear, any medical conditions you have that may affect the process, and your stretching history, they may be able to suggest something for you that works. But just trying things online because you see it on a forum or on a Facebook page, that is a recipe for disaster. And the biggest piece of bad advice I see like this is, oh, just downsize. And in some situations of tears or blowouts, yes, we can just downsize. But in many situations, just downsizing will make the problem just as bad, if not worse. Because if it's a tear, any form of jewelry in certain circumstances is still putting pressure on that wound, and that can lead to extreme thin spots forming. So if you tear your ears and you just downsize a few sizes, you may end up with really severe thin spots. When it comes to a blowout, downsizing is usually not the answer. Usually we have to remove plugs and leave them out, because any weight of any jewelry on that blowout is just going to make it worse and more irritated. But these things can be situational. Human bodies are not one size fits all, and every now and again we as piercers do see instances of stretching damage that we can work with a little bit more and help a little bit more. But these are things that need to be advised by an experienced, reputable professional who knows what they're doing when it comes to stretching. This is not advice that you should read on the internet and decide is going to work for you. It's kind of like if you were having a problem with your car and went on Google and someone went, oh, well, I put this super special weird oil in my tank and everything worked fine. Yeah, it may have worked for their car, but you're going to put that super special weird oil in your car and your car is going to explode. So you take it to a mechanic and you let your mechanic tell you what is wrong and what you need to do to fix it. You're having back pain, you go and you see your doctor. You don't say, oh, I'm going to put some cabbage and toothpaste on my back because I read on the internet that that works really good and is going to fix it. You've got to go see a professional for these things for any advice outside of the baseline. So if you have a blowout, you have a tear, go see a piercer, please. With tears, a lot of times, especially if they're minor, removing plugs, taking care of things, working with an experienced piercer, and some time and patience, you'll still get your lobes back to a really healthy place. If you end up with a thin spot after tearing, that's definitely going to impact your stretching process. You'll have to stretch much slower, and you may have to change or tweak your goals or plans for piercing to accommodate for this thin spot that you have. For blowouts, the bad news is normally once a blowout happens, it's permanent. You will see people online try and give you false hope that you can put plugs in backwards or massage it and make blowouts magically go away, and that is usually not the case. There is a lot that you can do to improve the tissue and improve the tissue appearance and health with things like massage and care, but the blowout is still going to be there. Really, the only 100% way to get rid of a blowout is to see either a modification artist or a plastic surgeon and have that blowout surgically corrected. Because there's not really much you can do for a blowout, this is why it's so important to practice safe stretching and make sure that things are done properly and safely and healthily. And as an aside, because I know anytime I talk about this, there's always people who are like, well, my friend magically healed their blowout with nothing. As a professional piercer, I'm gonna tell you right now, they have not magically healed shit. Their ears are still blown out. It's just not in the super extreme, visually obvious way that we imagine blowouts. It's typically more subtle. It's hidden on the back side of their ear, or it's hidden in the channel when they're wearing plugs, so other folks don't notice it. But as a professional piercer, I can assure you their ears are still blown out and they are still dealing with that damaged tissue, and it is still impacting their stretching process. Please, folks, be safe when you're stretching. Listen to professional piercers. Go slow. It is not a rush. It is not a race. You only get one set of ears. It is not worth it to potentially ruin all of your future stretching goals right now just to get a little bit bigger, a little bit faster. If you want to learn more about safe natural stretching, I'm going to link that video here in this video so you can go learn about safe stretching methods. And if you have more questions or want to see me talk more about stretching, let me know in the comments down below. As per usual, if you like my content, please hit like and subscribe, and hopefully we are hanging out again and chatting sometime soon. Bye!